Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and this is Friday, January the 11th. This will be our chart lesson for today, and it was just another slow, kind of methodical day where the price range was, we spent 9% of the day between 1468 and 1462, so, 5 or 6 points there. That's all we were able to muster. Um, just not much happening in the market right now. There weren't very many entries. You don't want to get stuck in something like this. You got to be really, really careful. Um, and, then you don't want to get stuck, over here in something like this either. So you got to find the trend lines. You got to make sure you got your lines right. That's the key to it. I talked with somebody else by email today, and we talked about that. And if you do find your trend lines, it's, it turns randomness and confusion, and it clarifies it. And so that's why we use our support and resistance lines and our trend lines, and because that's where you want to be looking for your entries to set up, and it all makes sense when you find those. So having said that, we opened up in this wedge today, and this trend line was fairly easy to find here. There's no reason anybody shouldn't have been able to find that trend line. That's a basic trend line. Now, what was harder was normally you copy that and drag it down, and if you did that, there it is, but we never got anywhere near that today. Um, but at the same time, if you drew a line off these first couple of swings right here, um, and look, that came into play this afternoon. So what we ended up having here was a wedge. And, you could have, you actually had a channel, but for some reason this was acting as support, and we don't want, we don't care why, we don't argue with it. All we know is this is acting as support, so we got to pay attention to it. And so that's what we did. But your first entry today where you got a really good setup was right here. The market opened back over in here somewhere. But look at all that just overlap. You're looking for a short off here, but there's no real good setup. And you can see prices kept bouncing. We finally broke lower, turned back up, tested the trend line, and got this big bearish bar. So that's a breakout pullback. It's a pullback to the trend line. It's really two legs because you got the first up and then you got a little correction, then a second up. And, if you're not used to looking at these charts, you probably can't see that, but trust me, there's two legs there. And if you went to a smaller chart and looked at the price action, you could probably see. But there's a move up, a move down, and then another move up that reversed. And it's there. I promise you, take my word on it. If you don't believe me, open up a 300 or 400 tick chart and you'll see a leg there. But this is a nice bearish reversal bar right off this trend line that we've turned down off how many times. It's a breakout pullback short. Great place to go short. And it took a minute, but if you hung on, it took on. I got a little nervous too when that bar closed right there, but it closed on its low. That's a good sign. And then prices headed low. And it wasn't a nice strong move down. It was real choppy. But that's not uncommon on a day like this, but it just keeps going lower. And you ride this down here until you either get some overlap or some kind of reversal, which was right here. And sometimes you might even think about going long. Especially notice this. Notice that there's one leg, then this correction, and then another leg. So in essence, we got a nice two-legged correction, and then we start up again. We did have a break of this trend line right here. We had attempted a retest, and we did retest those last closes. We didn't retest the low. We just couldn't get down there. Market was trending higher by now. And sometimes when you get an overshoot, that's not a real strong overshoot. I don't even know if you'd call that an overshoot, really. But anyway, we got the break, and then we got an attempted retest, and then the market, it kept trying to come back down. You can see that. But there were just too much, either there was too much buying or there just weren't enough people willing to sell it there. And, either way, it still works out to the same thing. The buyers are winning out and we're going higher, and that's all that matters. And once you start seeing higher highs and higher lows, then you got to be thinking, hey, we're going up, and you got to switch gears. So, sometimes people ask me that, generally every day we see the trend line break, we see a retest, then we see the reversal. and then suddenly we don't get that, and people freak out and they say, what happened? Why didn't it work? Well, nothing's 100%, and the market sometimes is going to do what it's going to do, and sometimes that's, while 9 times out of 10 you're going to get a lower low, and usually you're going to get 2 legs down to a new low after the trend line break. You really did get 2 legs down there. This is a smaller leg than a correction and a bigger leg, but we just didn't get a new low. We just couldn't get it. The market it just didn't happen, and that's not uncommon. That happens sometimes. Notice that I drew this short in green. We were still looking for shorts. Even here, I was still looking for shorts. But once we made these higher highs, then I started switching gears and we were looking for longs. This was a fair setup. You had a little double top right here. You kind of broke above, but that's not a really good reversal bar. It's got a lot of stem, but it's still got a little bit of a green body, but that could have ticked down and closed probably just as easy. So, you know, if you went short there, it's a second entry short. It meets our criteria. It's the first break of the trend line. So it was a good trade. But once we got into all of this, and then you got this little tick up, and then there's another turn down. Again, you might have wanted to enter here, but I didn't enter here, and I did not enter here because of all the overlap. The trade would have worked on either entry, and looking back, I kind of wished I'd have taken that one, but, you know, my rules tell me that's not a good idea. So, but either way, it worked. It would, you know, but I didn't take them, and so because I didn't like it. This one was so-so, and you might have had a better setup here than me. I just didn't like that one tick of green. I wanted to wait on a second entry off the high, and we got it right here. But by that time, we had all this overlap, and it just was not appealing to me. And you see it didn't go very far, although it was enough to scalp out. And if you got in here, you might have even had runners. You might even got a couple of points out of it. So looking back on it, I probably should have went short right here because it's a second entry short. It's 2 legs up. It's the first break of the trend line, and that could have just as easily, you know, sometimes it's just the timing. That could have easily closed right there. I like to see a little red in there and for it to close on its very low, though, similar to this trade right here. Notice how that closed on its very low, and it traded all the way up here. Here's another one that closed on its very low, even though this is not a good setup. You know, we're looking for longs here. I'm just looking for bars that look similar. So, but anyway, hopefully that makes sense to you. But I drew that one in green. If you took them, either one, you know, they're a little more aggressive, but they worked and they meet our criteria. This one's real questionable here because of that overlap. But this one definitely, looking back on it, I probably should have taken it. So then you got we went lower, and now I just had this line pulled out of the way, but you would have had it running right across there, and you're getting support right here. And you couldn't really see this until the next time it bounced there right here. So now you know, after this, you would have slid it in place. I didn't like this long, even though that was a good trade, because there's just no really good setup there. And you know, if you saw that one and took it, it is a failed break below a double bottom, but the bias is still down. Really, we're not making higher highs and higher lows yet. So this was a really risky trade. So no more, you know, no note of that trade. That's the reason I didn't mark it. If you saw it and took it, it worked, but it's not a great setup, and you know, next time it'll probably fail. So, but now you got a 2-legged move here that makes a, you know, we're finding this support. You can see that support across there now, and we find support again right there. You got a nice doji, a chance to go long right there with a very small stop. Easy scalp, and then it turns down again. And somebody asked me about this stem right here, and all this is, they were just running the stops down here, I believe, and it's a retest of this low. And there was a little trap right here. This was a nice little trap because we traded back up, and then we turned lower again, and then went back up. But basically what this is just a confirmation that this low is valid. Remember, the market moves in twos and it tests in twos, and so when you get a low down here and it comes back and tests it again and then closes way back up here, That's rejection right there, and then notice how that shot out of there, and that's why, because people recognize that rejection, and they're thinking, hey, we're going higher. And it was an easy scalp, but again, they come back and they get all the break-even stops. So it's just the market. The ES is very, very efficient, and the markets are very efficient, and you can't ignore that. If anybody tells you they're not, because if you notice where they come back to, just like right here, with that three-legged, those three matching lows on that low there were a lot of stops right there. I guarantee you there were a lot of stops right there from the people that got long over in here early, and so they pull down there and they run those stops, and it runs it down, and then suddenly it hits the buying pressure and it runs right back up, and then also you get new traders joining. And so I guarantee there were some stops from the people hiding from the that had gone long in here already, and they ran those stops, and then it scares them all out, and then they got to all re-enter here. And then once people saw this higher low here, they were really convinced now, because now you got higher, low, higher low, higher low, and now you got higher highs working up through here, and people recognize that, and then boom, another move up. And this trade is really just a repeat of these two right here. And you might have waited on this bar, but if you waited on this bar, then you're way too far away, you're too close to the highs, and it could run up here and meet resistance and turn back down. So you need to be entering in here. And the best way to do this doji here is just to drop a limit order, maybe a tick or two back in here. 2 ticks is getting too aggressive because you don't have much room, but 1 tick and you see it would have worked. And but sometimes you'll miss those trades, so sometimes you might want to have your stop in there just in case, and if your limit order doesn't work, you have to drop your stop in there and see what happens. But that's the best way to enter. And then it's too late in the day after that. There wasn't really any more setups anyway, and so really there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 for sure trades today. Fifth, 5 or 6, counting these possible 2 here, and other than that, it's just a really, just another really slow, methodical, not much movement, a 5 or 6 point range for the day, and just not much happening right now. Hopefully, it's going to come back soon. So just hang in there. Hopefully, you had a good trading day, a good week. Wasn't the kind of week that I hope for. Normally we do a lot better than this, but you can only take what the market will give you. And when you don't have any more entries in this, you got to be precise as well, because when you don't get a lot of setups, you can't afford to make mistakes. So, if your trading's been off a little bit, don't be too concerned. It's been a difficult market to trade, and not because it's any harder than ever, just there's just not any setups and there's not any movement. So don't let that discourage you. Hang in there, because it will come back. It might be a little while, but it's going to come back, and when it does, it'll come back with a vengeance. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Hopefully we'll get some better movement next week, and we'll be able to make some money next week. But this is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.